Hey, yo, what it did, y'all? Let's get right into it. Legacy Phrecia event is knocking down our door. And to say that I got a few comments asking me what I was thinking about doing for Sanctum would understate it, at least relative to the amount of comments that I'm used to getting, right? Now, I had to take a little bit of extra time to make this video only because I wanted to hit all of my ideas at once, as I had quite a lot of different things that I was working through and I needed to like trim the fat and relegate some of it to other people's work and whatnot. It was a lot going on, and doing all that while sick and trying to work on a couple projects at once does not work out very well, right? But I did in fact get my cooking done for what I wanted to show you guys, and some extra sessions that I can't wait to, show you guys. Now, just a quick reminder, right? These ascendancies are all new, and that means that all of the builds that are mentioned in this video are experimental. We, being all the people who create these builds, can only do so well to account for various factors surrounding builds that have not been directly tested, especially considering we're missing various parts of ascendancies. Like, you can attempt to account for not having small bits of survivability or damage elsewhere with numbers, but it might change feel. So be prepared for that, right? Now, before I get to the ones that I actually did get to work on the PLBs for, I wanted to talk about a couple of skills or ideas that I recommend for Sanctum just generally, but didn't actually finish cooking up myself. And the first on this list is BAMA, or Blink Arrow and Mirror Arrow, if you're not familiar with that acronym, right? And I didn't cook this one myself because, quite frankly, there's a better source out there. If you haven't heard of Previ, they're fantastic, and they've been the BAMA resource for quite a while. I wouldn't dare step on toes in this realm, right? Just check them out. However, their take and my initial thoughts on what I would do with it for Sanctum were identical. Put it on Servant of Arakaali, scale it through Poison. It's just a very comfortable and low effort playstyle that very, very easily will blast through Sanctum, right? One thing to address real quick, right? If you're familiar with the fact that Dot does have a damage cap in this game, I want you to not fret. That damage cap is 35.7 million DPS, and you very rarely need more damage than that in Sanctum. And when I say very rarely, I'm talking about specifically making no-hit runs more comfortable. This cap is also, quote, flexible in the sense that it is 35.7 million damage registered on the side of the enemy that is taking the damage, and therefore you can still scale your damage, quote unquote, higher than 35.7 million to account for Blunt Sword. It does not work for Spite Shell, unfortunately, but Blunt Sword can be accounted for through our good damage scaling. So yeah, check out Previ for information on how to build this. They have like a nice document with some thoughts about how to actually scale the character and a quick PLB for you to take a look at, right? Now, the other build that I have not finished cooking is Frostblade's Acadabassus. And the idea for why to even consider a skill that is quote unquote melee is because, as I just said, quote unquote melee, that skill might be even less melee than Lightning Strike. And it gave me some ideas. I chose Frostblades over Lightning Strike primarily because of how fast it is to get to its target. There's some things that I just don't like about the way Lightning Strike plays, and also visibility with Lightning Strike tends to be an issue if it's scaled correctly. Those are both factors that really heavily weighed on my mind when choosing between the two. Now, ascendancy wise, if you're interested to check this out, I was thinking it's either a Blind Prophet as a very safe pick that could be turned into a different, again, Lightning Strike or whatever if it doesn't work out, or deck stacking. Like, deck stacking has been strong for a while. The addition of ascendancies that support it just make it stronger. And this can be done on either Whisper or Wildspeaker. And I was looking more at Wildspeaker personally because I'm more interested in how Scourge of the Wilds and the more general strengths of that ascendancy would pan out. But if you want to get into the Mana Man race, or Mana Woman race rather, on Whisperer, it definitely works. Although I think if you're going to play a mana stacking Whisperer, you should just play like the Mana Forge Arrow characters, for example, or something in that ballpark. But hey, it's all in the right idea, right? Now, I'm not certain that the idea actually does have things, because I did have to like spend more of my time working on the builds that are actually shown in this video and other stuff that I've been working on for future projects. But the idea did make sense when I worked through it initially. Now, before I actually show you guys what I did get to work on, I need to take a moment to thank you guys for 2,500 subscribers. Saw a ding over last night and I kind of lost my shit, honestly. As around this time last year, I didn't even have 200 subscribers. So it's been insane to think about how much this channel has really grown in the past year. And so I greatly appreciate you guys, and I'd love to see if we could really go crazy with it this time, because I did set a dumb little ambitious goal for myself of hitting 10K by the end of this year. So, like, comment, subscribe, support the boy, all that good stuff. But also really just to see when I post new stuff, right? That's all there is to it. And also, while I'm at it, there's a Discord and a Twitch in the description down below, as you can always contact me in the Discord. Don't like ping me or anything, but like I do actually see messages and interact in there. Or check me out on Twitch. I'll be streaming the event starting at 2 p.m. CST on this one, because I actually do not work on Thursday. So it's perfect. Now, let's go ahead and actually get to showing you guys the POBs. So, to no one's surprise, the first build on this list is definitely going to be Penance, Dissipation, Surfcaster. I feel like this was a very obvious standout for people who are interested in Sanctum just from looking at these. And while I could talk about like other Ascendancy options, I think it's more important to just really emphasize the two things that focused me here on Surfcaster compared to anything else. And they're already on your screen here. Stormy Seas and Ghost of the Deep. Ghost of the Deep gives you this insane early speed steroid that I think is just invaluable for a build that's reliant so heavily on activation frequency. And 2, Stormy Seas frees up your rings. You get to have all the benefits of doing cold damage and all the conversion benefits of scaling, while not having to dedicate your rings to Call the Brotherhood. So you can use other really strong rings such as Polaric Devastation, Time Class. There's the Taming, number of options, right? And it also lets our cold damage shock. So it is just literally like downsideless. It's ridiculous, right? Huge, huge fan. Other Ascendancy nodes in Surfcaster are strong, but I think you could pick 2 of the other viable options and it would be fine no matter what, as long as you have Stormy Seas and Ghost of the Deep claim. Now, with that said, very quickly to go through the POB and kind of show the methodology for this POB as well as how the other POBs are made. I have loadouts in all of them that will show an early game setup and a late game setup, or a potential mid and late game setup depending. In this case, it is 3 early game setups and a mid game and a late game setup, because, well, the late game is always charge stacking, right? Let's just be real for a second. There are other options, but this is just the easiest put together. Prepare for the prices on this to be high. I'm just going to be honest with you. Just prepare for the prices to be high. Now, before getting there, though, there are 3 options on how to progress early that are much more interesting to talk about, because the charge stacking setup is the same charge stacking setup that we've been using for a long time, and you can copy the POB pretty verbatim on that part, and it'll work out pretty well, except for I don't have a movement skill in here at the moment, or I do actually have it in here. Good. If I didn't, it would have been in post, whatever. So, the 3 early game setups, one of them uses no unique weapons. I just kind of want to show you a baseline for what the character could look like if you didn't have the unique weapons, but I am a fan of this Story on East Catalyst setup, and it has nothing to do with the damage, because the damage is weaker than the rares, but it removes the crafting from the experience, as well as it gives me a source of life leech. This life leech will be relevant in a different point going forward. 2, or Bitter Dream, which I think is the highest ceiling option, but it's also the one that's the most flexible in your ability to comfortably run a shield alongside it, and that shield being Ghastly Theater, so that you don't die to the cleave from this one guard in particular that just loves to take you out back. We hate that guy. So Ghastly Theater is a flex option in the Bitter Dream setup. Now, back to the Catalyst, right? Because I mentioned the leech. It's like, well, why is the leech relevant? All 3 setups on screen here run a self-ignite setup with Eye of Innocence and Moku's Embrace. Using Eye of Innocence to, ignite yourself and give you some leech of her fire damage, but this also will let you leech off of non-fire damage as well. And then Moku's Embrace to, really get it rolling. That cast speed is insane. And so we want to be able to sustain ourselves through that. You also want to have a dousing flask on you just in case it gets overwhelming. And it's worth noting that you can use the Organized Catalyst to get around the leech. You can also use like a Herald of Ashes and a Herald of Purity to get the ignites rolling sooner if you don't have like a source of flat fire on like a jewel or something, right? Okay. All of that said, that's mostly the important notes about the differences in setups. There's one other thing that you want to cover, which is Spectres and AG, which I will put more detail in here before it's in post. I'm just kind of recording this so I can get this edited up and prettyfied while the video is being edited and uploaded and whatnot. The Spectres of choice for this build are either 2 Aura Spectres or 1 Aura Spectre and a Perfect Forest Warrior. It's worth noting that all of the auras that are relevant for this build, Hatred, Wrath, Zealotry, and Haste, can all be found on a Spectre. I would prefer getting my Wrath off of it for more damage, or getting my Haste off of it so that I don't have to have 155 decks. Those are your 2 options. right? Those are the two options that I heavily recommend anyways. Zealotry and hatred do exist. Do the math for yourself in terms of like what you were willing to pay for, especially if they die, right? And then in AG, you can have an AG. It kind of sucks to have one before Gargan's Flight, to be honest, but just don't Guardian's Blessing it and it'll be fine. And speaking of Guardian's Blessing, that is something else that you can do is attach one of your auras, such as like Zealotry, for example, to like instead of Arrogance here, you can do Guardian's Blessing on a golem that you then just summon. And it becomes the equivalent of running like Divine Blessing back in the day. Very free damage. Then, if you want to, re-enable your low life here, you can just Herald of Ash on Arrogance. And this is like another option, right? Now, of course, I still would not really be walking around with it like this personally, but that, again, that's kind of a personal thing. You unspec this, right? So I still would probably not be walking around on low life, just like as a personal taste, but it's there for when you want it to spike your damage going into Lycia is the idea. That covers everything for this PLB. It's worth noting that the Spectre and AG and Guardian's Blessing notes that I mentioned here will apply to the other characters in this video as well. However, the Spectre thing is a little bit more pertinent here than the other two, simply because the other two builds actually do not benefit from nearly as many auras as this one does. Also, if you need any additional resources for this character or anything else, there are other people you can ask me. Also, I have a video on my channel of another Penance character, not quite Surfcaster, because it is in fact a Hierophant, which I think was better, but you'll get to see like another rendition of how I did it, so you can kind of see that the theming really does just remain the same. All right, this one goes out to all of y'all who have been waiting for the Hexblast update, because I was going to make one. I knew I was going to make one. I just had to figure out what I wanted to do. I tossed a couple options around. We landed on Servant of Arakaali. I determined that Servant of Arakaali was the right pick, actually, because of how much damage we get for free early. One of the bigger weaknesses of this build is a lack of reservations that work for the character, and so the Ascendancy just kind of providing us reservations that actually do work is really nice. Ignore Fatal Bite. I just kind of clicked something because, I don't know, it was just bothering me. I only had 3 things clicked. It's very bad. But we get Envy, we get Aspect of the Spider, and we get, the Rest Shred. It's very, very good. And the Rest Shred actually enabled something cool that I came up with for a pre-Sandstorm version of the character. So you're sitting here looking right now at the Sandstorm version of the character, which of course is capped crit, because Sandstorm messages a ridiculously broken helmet that you will then pair with a really well-crafted wand, shield, all this stuff. I'm going to keep it a buck with you. I'm not going to go over this in super high detail because I have multiple videos on this channel already that talk about Hexblast Mind's Trickster, and a lot of the gearing is identical, especially if you look at my high-end guide from this league. It's very geared towards Sanctum. It's Mage Blood build, but the ideas still hold. There's not a lot of differences in how I actually made the character operate this time around. So not going to spend too much time on little things like that. I'm more focusing on things that are relevant for starting the character or other things, but relevant to early Sanctum runs. But I just wanted to remind you guys that I do have resources on the channel already for lots of Hexblast between recent leagues. Now, all that said, strong gear crafted here, usual stuff. The tree is a very standard tree. It actually looks very similar to one of my other trees. You'll notice, again, offshoot to Pain Attunement. Something that's worth noting, by the way, is that you can cut all of these points here up to coordination, as well as down here. For a second cluster setup, you will need to use a small cluster to make Zealotry cheaper to pull this off. But you absolutely can do that, and it will give you so much more damage, but it does, it's higher investment, so I didn't need to put it in here. It's just like an option for really sending the damage to the moon, right? Then skill setup, pretty standard stuff. It looks like an absolute smorgasbord of nonsense, trust me. Now, the thing that's interesting to me is the setup here that I have in the middle, where, right now we have the starting setup is usually a starter setup with Dread Arc and Propane Proxy, with usual stuff to support it, which look how much damage that deals, even with low investment. Then we go to our second POB, and this is a setup that gives you doubles your damage for a decent investment. But the bigger thing is that it gets you out of Dread Arc onto a real wand that you can then put on the Curse on Hit Ring and Eye of Malice. which this not working right now means I messed something up in my math because this was supposed to be way more impactful than it currently is being. What happened to my resistance shredding? Elemental weakness. Where's my flammability? Oh, I see. Okay, I'm gonna do a thing here and save it, and it's gonna be nasty and dirty, but I'll have it cleaned up when I put this in the POB properly in the future. Later on. There we go. When I have this in the comments, it won't be as nasty and dirty. I was like, something's messed up here because it's supposed to be a lot higher than that. So Eye of Malice is an idea that I came up with when I was thinking about like what can I put in the helmet slot when you don't have Sandstorm Visage, because Sandstorm Visage is going to likely be expensive. Hexblasters want this. Other builds really even want it. And it's from Sanctum and a kind of rare nowadays. It's pretty expensive in trade, as I'm pretty sure a lot of you have seen. So wouldn't be surprised if that was the case here as well. And so what I came up with was using Eye of Malice to amp up all of the res shredding we're doing, which, push an extra layer of how nice that is that the Ascendancy, Servant of Arakaali, gives us a red shred. Huge fan of it. So we get to use Eye of Malice and push our damage up that way. Then we can transition into Sandstorm Visage, which has a completely different skill setup, jump setup, just to remind you that you, in fact, will drop increased crit chance support for real damage things. Now, all that said, I want to cover again, just like I did with the last POV, that there are specters and whatnot that are good for the build. It's worth noting, though, the only damage specter you can use is one that gives you Zealotry or ones that debuff enemies. So, like the Pill, what is it called? Pale Harpies or something like that. Like you can use those to debuff enemies to help you do more damage. That's like an option. You can use Forest Masters to make yourself faster. Again, that's an option. So on and so forth. As well as, the AG thing again, or you can, do the Zealotry on your Guardian's Blessing setup again here. Like these are all viable options. It's really up to you how you see to do it, right? The more important thing is that it does in fact work. And if you have any questions you want more details about, feel free to, ask them in the comments, or again, I have old resources about this. Now, for the last build of this video, I have some new stuff for you guys, right? This is the build that I've been thinking about for a long time. It's been about 2-3 weeks now that I've been thinking about this idea, but didn't really have time to put it into practice. Not that I had time, but I wasn't interested in doing it because running Sanctum after you've already run it enough for the league is kind of boring. But I've been staring at Eyeshot of Penetration ever since Arrow and Fearless Dumbo did their versions of it in 323. And they really made it look crazy. So I've been staring at this idea for a while, thinking about how I'd want to pull it off as a potential Sanctum runner. And what I felt like we were missing all this time was an Ascendancy that really supported a part of it being like expanded in its usefulness. And well, Scavenger gave us that. That is nasty. So the main thing here is Fury Valve and Doomfletch. Doomfletch from Doomfletch's Prism is one of my favorite items of all time. Like Doomfletch and Doomfletch's Prism, both of them, love them. And what I was realizing was I needed a way to actually like really balloon something that could do with this. I was like, oh yeah, Eyeshot of Pen is a Fizz converted skill. This gives us Fizz as extra. Perfect. Fury Valve, mechanically very nice with this skill for actually getting clear, because it allows us to have a bunch of splits instead of all the extra penetrations that Eyeshot of Penetration offers. So massive. As well, then we have Blunderbore, which I took Blunderbore just because I could. It's worth noting that you could change this to a number of things in the slot. It doesn't really matter which one you choose. That's a personal preference. Lock, Shape, or Sweep before you do anything funny with low life, like Red Reservations, Stasis Prison, or Cloak of Flame for survivability purposes. Like Cloak of Flame is really nice for survivability purposes, I will say. All of these options are in play. Do what you will. And then the whole idea is just, giant Fizba that you don't need to scale attack speed on, because we're going to be scaling by throwing speed instead, with some interesting items scaled around it, such as like Aquana's Bite, because we're going to be chilling and freezing at like maximum efficiency. It's very nice. Fledgling, Ashrend. I feel like nothing super crazy here. We are using Relentless Coil plus Volatility support because we have so much scaling on min and max that it's like a really perfect hand. It does like make our damage range very volatile though, right? Like we have a volatile damage range, but I like a little bit of swing math, so why not? Then The big thing here is like the damage on this actually looks fine. I didn't bother trying to cost this out because who knows how like useful some of these items are. However, Iona's Bite usually is not that expensive, but the corruption might be. Ash Friend usually not that expensive. Brine Watt Riddler is usually not that expensive. Taming will be kind of pricey, and Coil can be pricey. Depends on the circumstances, right? Who knows? And then I have a starting setup as well that uses a non-rare bow that you could just put a rare bow in its place instead, but I was curious what the damage will look like with Silver Tongue of all things, because I realized that Silver Tongue fits the requirements for this build perfectly. We use Drill Neck instead of Iona's Bite at this point, though. Iona's Bite is fine here as well, but I just like the idea of using Drill Neck while your damage is a little bit lower. And then some more setup otherwise across the board. There's not a whole lot of like extra like weird nuance here or anything, no weird strange mechanics. It's just, I don't know, an idea for a build that I wanted to see if I could actually get good damage on. And I found that I could in fact get the damage above 5 million on an early investment setup and get it to above 30 on a good investment setup, which meant that it felt like a perfectly fine Sanctum runner to like actually recommend. Just, it's again, this is with like a Herald toggle, which is worth noting, by the way, on the end game setup of this, you actually don't have to run it on your life. I run it on life for comfort during preloading. But you don't have to do this. You could just like walk around with it like on your mana and feel comfortable and safe, right? So enjoy that as well. All that said, that covers, this build is number 3, and then I have a couple ending notes that I'd like to give you guys about just starting Sanctum in general. All right. So to wrap this up, I have a couple quick tips that I want to remind you guys of. The first of this being the meaningful damage thresholds that you need to cross. 1 million damage gives you a very comfortable run through the quest tome, right? Like a very easy kill on Lycia. 3 milli is for I level 75 tomes, 10 milli for I83 tomes, and then 20 and 40 milli are benchmarks that I keep in mind for myself for ignoring afflictions or challenge runs, such as the Balance of Terror run or the one that gives Winds of Fate. If you're running either of those, these damage numbers really just ignore the beef that can be added to Lycia mid-run or pre-run. Second, if you are struggling to get yourself some currency before getting into the Sanctum, Labyrinth and Heist are both content types that will actually make you a decent stack of currency to work with early on. And it's very related to my third tip and my last tip here, which is that you do not have to actually kill Kitava the second time to go into the Sanctum. Sanctum is active from Act 10. So you can just save yourself 30 res on all types of resistance, which is also why I recommend Lab and Heist, as they are content that is enterable and farmable without having done Kitava. All of that said, that wraps it up for this video. If you guys have any additional questions, feel free to drop those in the comments down below. Support the video. Come check out the stream if you want to, see how I'm doing live or ask any questions. I will make sure to actually post some updates here if I remember, and all that good stuff. Thank you guys for watching, and I shall see you guys in the next one. Actually, before I do go though, I do want to quickly remind you guys that if you want to learn even more about Sanctum, I do have a full comprehensive guide on this channel that is very relevant still. Feel free to watch that. All right, now I'm actually out of here. Peace.